I'm any new province, and this week we're playing Thermo Delver 4 Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. Thermo Delver is a deck that performed well in not one but two tournaments this weekend. It took Brazilian player Gilmore Layer all the way to the top 8 of Pauper Masters, but also GL Nemesis took it to a great finish in the Pauper Challenge. The deck we're playing today is closest to the strategy that GL Nemesis used to finish so well on the Pauper Challenge this weekend. I'm going to start the deck tech off by breaking down this deck's major threats. First, we have Gitu Lava Runner, a newcomer from Dominaria. It costs 1 red for a 1/2, and as long as there are 2 or more instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, Lava Runner gets +1/+0 and haste. While some Pauper players refer to Gitu Lava Runner as the Garbo guide, I've been seeing this little guy pop up in tons of burn results. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays alongside all of these powerful cantrips instead. We're also playing Delver of Secrets, one of the best threats in the entire Pauper metagame. It costs 1 blue for a 1/1 human wizard, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If an instant or sorcery card is revealed this way, transform Delver of Secrets. It becomes Insectile Aberration, which is a 3/2 flyer. Given people's general antagonism to Delver of Secrets, I probably don't have to remind you why this is powerful, but if you were wondering, attacking for 3 on turn 2 in the air is pretty busted. Next, I'm going to break down our value creatures that synergize super well with the rest of our deck, which is essentially a ton of cantrips and a few choice burn spells. First, we have Augur of Bolas. It costs 1 and a blue for a 1/3, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. I won't hesitate to snap off a counter against an Augur of Bolas or strip it from my opponent's hand with something like a Divest. This card is an insane 2-for-1, and once it hits the battlefield, it's already generating value by finding you another cantrip or burn spell. Next, we have Thermo Alchemist, and yes, I do think this is a value creature. It costs 1 and a red for an 0/3 with Defender that you can tap to deal 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you untap Thermo Alchemist. Besides being an excellent blocker and shoring up some of Delver's weaknesses against fast decks, Thermo Alchemist just turns into a damage machine as the game goes on. Next, I'm going to talk about our card filtering and card advantage spells, and these are some of the best in the entire format. First, we have Gush. It costs 4 and a blue for an instant that you may return 2 islands you control to your hand rather than pay its mana cost. It draws you 2 cards. You don't have to play with Gush for very long to realize how truly busted it is. Not only can you cast this spell for free, but you can also find the second or third card you stacked on top of your library with something like a Preordain or a Ponder. Next, we have Brainstorm. It costs 1 blue for an instant that draws you 3 cards but makes you put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order after you do so. There are a lot of formats where playing Brainstorm is pretty safe. You have lots of fetch lands and effects to put cards to the bottom of your library, but if you want to get true advantage out of this spell in Pauper, you have to include fetch lands and cards like Augur of Bolas to make sure those 2 cards you don't want end up going to somewhere else in your library. If you can't fetch away the 2 cards you don't want or put them to the bottom of your library with Augur of Bolas, you can use this next cantrip to do exactly that. This is Ponder. It costs 1 blue for a sorcery that lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. You may shuffle your library, and then you draw a card. Having this much choice in how your next 2 draw steps are going to go is definitely a difficult thing to navigate. I'm almost happy when I just use Ponder to shuffle my library after a Brainstorm. Finally, we have the full 4 Preordain. It costs 1 blue for a sorcery that lets you scry 2, then draw a card. In decks that aren't looking to flip Delver of Secrets or draw into their top 3 cards with something like a Gush, I often find Preordain to be a little bit more powerful. With Preordain, you can take the spells that you don't want and scry them directly to the bottom of your library without having to risk the shuffle effect of Ponder, just putting another one of them back on top again. Next, we have our counter package, and this particular counter package is a total Blue Mage dream. First, we have Daze, another potentially free spell. It costs 1 and a blue for an instant that lets you return an island you control to your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. You counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. It's really hard to understand how you're supposed to use days perfectly. I've had to play with this spell a number of times and I still don't have my head all the way around it. Still, the times I do play this card correctly, it usually turns out pretty well. Next, we have Dispel, which costs 1 blue for an instant that counters target instant spell. You often see Dispels out of players' sideboards. This allows you to counter spells more efficiently than using other more expensive counter magic. The thing is, though, a lot of decks in Pauper use some form of instant spell, so Dispel is hardly ever dead, and at worst, we can use it to counter one of our own spells to get that last point of lethal damage with Thermo Alchemist. Our last counterspell is Counterspell. It costs 2 blue and it allows you to counter target spell. You have to do your best to hit exactly the right spell with this to make sure you get as much value as possible. One of the big differences between GL Nemesis and Gilmore Layer's list is that Gilmore played a lot less dazes. They brought in cards like Echoing Truth instead. I think it's pretty cool that they played these as kind of a meta call, so I'm trying 1 Echoing Truth in my main board instead of a 4th daze. Next up is our burn package. We're going to be pinging away at our opponent with Thermo Alchemists and hopefully hitting for early damage with our Delver of Secrets, so a few well-timed burn spells can certainly end the game. First, we have Lightning Bolt, the quintessential burn spell. It costs 1 red for an instant that deals 3 damage to any target. We're running 1 Flame Slash as interaction. I think this is really smart. Some decks have creatures that are too big to deal with a Lightning Bolt, and we're just a little bit on the slower side, so we need a Flame Slash to keep that aggro down. We have a single Flame Jab, which is an awesome enabler for Thermo Alchemist just in case we're flooding out. I think an inclusion of exactly 1 Flame Jab was super smart. Sorry about that, had to take a second to switch out my basics for snow-covered lands, and this time it's not just because I think they look cool. GL Nemesis was running regular basics, and that's probably totally fine, but Gilmore was running the full set of snow-covered lands. I think this was one of the decks that might actually be able to benefit by tricking your opponent into thinking that you're on something like Scred Delver. For our basics, we've got 7 snow-covered islands and 3 snow-covered mountains, tons of untapped sources to hit our Delvers and Thermo Alchemists on time. We're running 2 Swiftwater Cliffs. They're standard Pauper duels, enter the battlefield tapped, gain you a life, and when they become untapped, they add red or blue, and we're running 4 Evolving Wilds. Great shuffling effects for our Brainstorm. You can tap and sacrifice them to search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have the full playset of Stormbound Geists for getting in the way of opposing Delvers and for eating up Edicts. We've got 2 Electrickeries for when there's a bunch of X1s running around. We've got another Echoing Truth just in case our opponent is on troublesome permanents that we might have trouble dealing with otherwise. We have 3 Pyroblasts for forcing our counterspells through other counterspells. We have 3 Flame Slashes if our opponent is crazy about having a bunch of 4/4s, and we have 2 Hydroblasts to really nail down that burn matchup. And there it is, Thermo Delver. Congratulations again on your finishes, Gilmore and GL Nemesis. We're going to take this deck live into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince. We're there every Monday night playing competitive Pauper decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you, you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Monday night.